Welcome to Defending Digital. I'm Chad Warner. I'm pleased to have with me Carey Parker, author of Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, a step-by-step guide to computer security for non-techies. I recently read the book and it jumped straight to the top of my list. It expertly addresses a range of security and privacy topics. It contains clear, simple terms and helpful analogies. Carey, today I'd like to learn more about the advice that you give in Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. But first, let's go back in time. What piqued your interest in cybersecurity and privacy in the first place? I know some of the story from reading your book, but I'm sure our listeners would like to hear the whole story.
Yeah. And first off, Chad, thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate that. I'm a software engineer. I've been doing coding for 26 plus years or something now. And, as a software engineer, I think I've always been kind of interested in crypto and cybersecurity kind of from a technical aspect. But, for me, what really kind of lit the fire under me and got me going was the Edward Snowden revelations back in 2013, the summer of 2013. And, I'm not really a black helicopter kind of guy or a tinfoil hat kind of guy, but yeah, I was shocked. I mean, I assumed that our intelligence agencies were doing some things, and maybe I preferred not to know and put my head in the sand. But man, when those things came out, it was really flooring for me, and it was really a wake up call. And I just kind of felt like I needed to do something. And so I kind of thought about it, and it's like, I've always wanted to write a book. And so I went looking, and I thought, surely there's like a cybersecurity for dummies or something out there. And there really wasn't, or I think there was, but it was just really old, like 10 years old. And I was like, okay, that's not going to work. And so, that's kind of where it all came together for me. And ever, since then it's just gotten worse. I've always been kind of political and kind of tuned into the news anyway, but after Snowden and, and then came Cambridge Analytica and Equifax and all these really major things going on. And, I just kind of felt like a lot of people, because I'm being the engineer, I'm the IT guy for my family. It's a pretty big family.
Yeah.
And they're constantly asking me things like, Carey, do I have a virus? What should I be using a VPN? What's the safest this or safest that? And then so I thought, what, why don't we just put this all down in a book? And that'll kind of be my contribution. So that's where I got started, and that's kind of why I did what I did.
Yeah, gotcha. So looking at the current state of personal or consumer cybersecurity, what would you say are the biggest threats that are out there, the biggest challenges that people are facing?
Well, great question. And there are a lot. There's a lot going on, and but if I had to pick like maybe like a top three or something, phishing attacks I think probably is a big one. There's that's very common. It's very easy to get tripped up. Of course, that's PHISHING, where the bad guys are sending you usually emails trying to get you to click on a link you shouldn't, or go to a website you shouldn't, or go to a fake site and maybe get you to cough up some information, either a credit card or credentials or something, that can lead to more nefarious things down the road. And they're getting clever. I mean, there's the classic Nigerian prince, right, that we all know about. But, some of these, like you'll get these really dire emails that, from PayPal or Amazon or Apple saying your account's been suspended. If you don't act on this soon, something really even worse is going to happen. Click here to correct the problem. And they look really real, and often take you to websites that look really real. And, I admit there's some of those I've had to look at really carefully. So phishing is definitely a problem. And there's a lot of the way people get infected today is through phishing. So I'd say another one today, especially like in recent years, has been ransomware. And I think what really kind of, ransomware, of course, is, you get infected by something, and that something encrypts or locks up or scrambles all of your files on your computer in such a way that they could descramble them, but they've got the key. The analogy, and I love my analogies, though. The analogy I always use is like, the thieves broke into your house, they took all your valuables, and then they put them in a safe in your living room and left a note. You still have all your stuff. You just can't get to it. And I think what really kind of allowed ransomware to take off was Bitcoin and cryptocurrency, because now these guys have a way to get paid that's pretty anonymous. It's not 100% anonymous, but it makes it really easy to extort money from people and not have it be traceable. So I think that those kind of go hand in hand, and you've seen a lot of this in the news lately, that a lot of school districts, and they're kind of going where I think they used to started off targeting individual people, and maybe you didn't hear about it as much. Now they're targeting small and medium businesses or little municipalities, and folks that, like if you go to a school, and like this happened this summer or right before school started, a bunch of school districts in Texas got hit with ransomware. I mean, the school's starting. I mean, you've got to have that data. You've got to have your computers back. They were really over a barrel.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, yeah, ransomware I think is a scourge that we're dealing with a lot lately. And of course, identity theft, that's been around forever, but it's got to rank up there because it may not happen as often, but the consequences are dire. I mean, when if you're a real victim of identity theft, that can follow you around for years, and it can be really hard to dig out of. So there's a lot of things out there, but if I had to pick maybe a top three, I think that's probably what I'd go with.
Yeah, yeah. And in your book, you talk about not only cybersecurity, but kind of digital privacy as well. And something like identity theft, kind of goes in both of those areas. It's security related, it's privacy related. Anything else you would add to the list in terms of threats, specifically in the area of privacy?
Yes. And as I've learned, over the years, to me, I kind of equated the two. When I was first starting out on this, to me, it was like cybersecurity and privacy were all, maybe two sides of the same coin, but very related. And as the years have gone by, and I've done more and more, education and learning and teaching and all that kind of stuff, I've really kind of realized that they're two separate beasts. Security and privacy, while related, and I think security is necessary for privacy, they're not the same thing. And the threats to our privacy today are myriad and legion, as I like to say. There's a lot of things going on, and it's coming from two big angles. It's not even just one thing. It's for the corporate world. I mean, our data is being bought and sold and collected in unbelievable quantities, and there's really not a lot of sunlight on that right now, and a lot of transparency of what's really going on there until someone gets caught. But I mean, there's so much more. It's just the tip of the iceberg. I mean, what's going on out there is just crazy. It's a total wild, wild west, especially in the United States, where we just have not come up with any federal regulations around this. Now in Europe, if you remember last May, and you got all those notices in your mailbox about updated privacy policies all at once, that was no coincidence. That's because last May, Europe, the EU, enacted some really good privacy regulations. I mean, nothing's perfect, but the GDPR, or General Data Protection Regulation, went into effect last May and caused a lot of companies to have to, rejigger what they're doing. And in some senses, it's helped all of us because, a lot of companies, if I'm going to bother doing this once, I'll just do it for everybody, which in that case, it helps us. Kind of like California, like with car emissions, like, they led the nation with that, and Ford's not going to make one car for California and one car for the rest of the country. Right. So, yeah. So in some cases, even though it's not a local regulation, I think that's actually helped us a little bit there too. So, but I mean, so all these devices that were, the Internet of Things, which is, hooking everything up to the internet, which didn't used to be hooked up to the internet, toasters, your appliances, smart TVs, you can't buy a dumb TV anymore. Light bulbs, and I'm not kidding about toasters, by the way. There actually was a smart toaster. And the problem is that because all these electronic products are, so thin margin, the last thing these guys want to do is put security on these things, and they're computers. These things are computers. And if they're hooked up to the internet, they're just easy prey for hackers. And so a lot of trouble's been with all the boom of IoT, and with that, and smart TVs has come the privacy aspect of that, where they're tattling on you constantly. I've seen some recent studies lately that just are jaw-dropping, where these 3 studies recently came out where they looked at TVs kind of specifically and IoT devices in general, and put them on the network and put some sniffers on the network and kind of put some honeypots out there to kind of trigger them and whatever, and kind of looked what they were doing. And they're tattling on you all the time. I mean, smart TVs are literally watching what you're watching. I mean, if you've ever heard of the Shazam app for music, where you say, what song is that playing in the background right now? Well, we'll whip out Shazam and it'll listen for 10 seconds and it'll figure out what song it is and tell you who it was. Mac the Knife by Bobby Darin. TVs are now doing that too. They're actually sampling the videos that are on your screen to figure out what you're watching. Not just shows, but what commercials you're watching. It's crazy. I could go on and on. It's just jaw dropping. So but that's just the corporate side. That's just what Google and Facebook and all these other companies are doing. And then there's the government side, which of course is where the Snowden stuff came into effect. And I really was hoping that when the Snowden revelations came out, that would be a wake up call and we'd see some real changes. But honestly, there just really haven't been that many. I don't know if most people think that it still doesn't apply to them, or maybe they're just thinking I have nothing to hide, so it doesn't matter. Or maybe they think that they need to give up that privacy in order to have security, which I think is a false choice.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's dangerous. And so a couple things, if you'll just let me ramble a little bit. So there was this guy named Jeremy Bentham back in the 1700s who created this idea of a prison system, basically called a panopticon.
Mhm.
And what it was this like cylindrical jail. And the idea being that all on the outside ring were all the jail cells that faced inward, such that there was a tower in the middle where the guards could watch them. And it was set up such that the guards could watch them without them knowing particularly that they were being watched. So basically, all the inmates had to assume at any given moment that they could be watched.
Mhm.
And honestly, that's where we are now. I mean, at this point, if you really are paying attention, you've got to realize that at any given moment, you could be monitored in 6 ways to Sunday. And because, of where we are today, you could save this information on every person forever.
Mhm.
And, so it's one thing to say someone caught you doing something bad, but it's another thing to say, I could look over 10 years and see what Carey's been up to. I'll find something.
Yeah.
Right. And then, facial recognition, that's blowing up now too. We've got cameras everywhere, but now we've got computers that are actually trying to remember who they saw and maybe specifically who they are. Cause the government in particular is using, they're going to the passport databases or the DMV databases. And, we didn't originally give up our pictures for that purpose, but they're just sitting there
Mhm.
and, they've got my face and my name and my address and they say, hey, let me have that data. And now I can track where Carey goes. I mean, it's bad.
Yeah, you're listing, so the IoT devices, and I should start a list of just the um, ludicrous items that are being produced. Diapers. There are IoT diapers. I don't know
Sure.
what the market purpose is for that, but it exists.
Yeah.
So in your book, you have these 6 priorities that you get to at the end of the book,
Mhm.
which you describe as kind of the first things that people should focus on. You don't want to overwhelm people, so
Mhm.
kind of give them just some priorities to look at. So those are: 1, back up your files; 2, keep your computer and phone software updated; 3, use strong, unique passwords for important sites;
Mhm.
4, turn on 2-factor authentication when possible; 5, browse the web safely using a good browser with security plugins; and 6, don't open attachments or links that you're not expecting. How did you arrive at those 6 items?
Yeah. So, not in retrospect, I almost wish I'd put those at the beginning of the book a little bit as a little bit of a teaser. But I mean, because as you know from reading the book, there's like 150 different tips in
Yeah.
that book. There's a lot of things to do, and so I think at the end, because I've been teaching a class around this book too, and I can see that people get overwhelmed, and so it's like, okay, let's distill this down. Let's pick the top 5 or 6 things, and for me, these were the ones that were like the most bang for the buck. And honestly,
Mhm.
it's like infinite bang for the buck because most of these are zero cost.
Sure.
The only one of these, like number one, is the only one that really could cost you money, and that's going to, probably have to buy an external hard drive or pay for a monthly cloud backup service. But all the rest are free, and they're really powerful. It's like in my mind, I wanted to go back and look through the list and think, okay, I mean, if someone says, Carey, I understand what you're saying, these are all great, but I'm just overwhelmed. I can't do all these things. Just lay it out for me. What are the things I really just have to do? And so that's where I went back through the list. And that's kind of what I came up with. And so I'll walk through them a little bit. Back up your file. So that's an easy one. So it's like a do-over, right? It's a mulligan. If for some reason something happens, if you get infected with malware, if your computer dies, you drop your phone in the toilet, whatever the case may be, you gotta have a backup. If you don't have, any way to replace those, priceless family photos or, tax documents or whatever the case may be, these irreplaceable documents, the only way you can get around that is have a backup. And so that kind of gives you a do-over. So if something bad really does happen, at least you can replace those files. So that's kind of like a baseline for me. And then after that, keeping your stuff up to date. There's, software has bugs. There's,
Mhm.
I'm a software engineer. I can write the best software on the planet. There's always going to be bugs. So because there's, it's because you just have to assume there's going to be bugs. There's going to be fixes, and the best way to stay ahead of that is to have all your software updating. And most software, well, not maybe not most, a lot of software today has got, and all operating systems have a built-in mechanism for auto updating, and so it'll kind of do it for you if you tell it to. And so it's really important you stay up to date. passwords, man. So I talk about this in the book, and a lot of people are all excited about biometrics. I want to do a fingerprint, or I want a face scan because I can't lose that, I can't forget that, and yeah. But when you really look at it, I mean, those are kind of good as secondary things, or maybe just for your phone because you have to have physical possession of it. But you really need strong, unique password. That's still today, unfortunately, probably the best method for guarding everything. And because there's so many breaches where these password databases are stolen, if you use this password on one site and then they crack that, the bad guys are already automating the process. I mean, once they get these lists of passwords that people use, they turn right around and try other websites to see if they work somewhere else. So if maybe you use this weak password on your mail account because you weren't too worried about it, but you also use that password on your bank account, you know,
Yeah,
if
credential
they
stuff.
compromise one, they're going to compromise, they could very easily compromise the other. It's called credential stuffing. I mean, it's got a term. I mean, it's a thing. So the only way around that is to have long, strong passwords. Of course, the only way for a human to do that is to use a tool, which is like a password manager. So that leads into that one. And then the other thing though too is two-factor authentication, which is really starting to catch on. And that it's defense in depth. It's so someone does get your password, or someone they figure out a way on the system to get around the password authentication mechanism, or something like that. Well, then if you have a second factor, you have something else they have to do. It's two things they have to get through to get to your account. Now, not only do they have to get through that part, but they have to have your smartphone, and they've got they got to have physical access to your phone, and they've got to be able to open it. So they've got to be able to get through the PIN code or the fingerprint or whatever to get the two-factor ID. So I've heard somewhere that two-factor alone would would stop like 99% of the credential attacks, because it's just having that extra step is just crucial. So use that definitely where you can, of course. And then the privacy thing, surfing the web. You definitely want to have a good privacy respecting browser with some privacy protecting plugins. Security, most browsers I think are doing a really good job with security. It's privacy where they really differ, and that's one of the reasons I usually recommend that people don't use Chrome, because Chrome is made by Google, and Google's business model, they're an ad company that 90% of their revenue is from advertising. And so they're an ad company that just happens to make a web browser and a search engine. So they're monetizing you, let's face it. And so while they've done some great security stuff, from a privacy perspective, I just can't go. I can't recommend Google. And then obviously we talked about not phishing attacks and emails that try to get you to click on links and get you infected. So if you don't, basic rule of thumb, if you didn't ask for it, if this email comes to you with an attachment that you didn't explicitly ask for, or sends you a link to something, don't trust it.
Yeah. Somewhere I read, you can't win a contest that you didn't enter. People get these messages, hey, you just won this thing. Oh,
Right.
Oh, really? When did you enter that? Oh, I didn't. Now, how did you win it if you never entered it?
Yeah, very good point. Yep.
So I want to get your perspective as a parent. So we've talked about a lot of these issues. There's a lot of overlap between issues that would affect kids the same as adults, and a lot of the security and privacy principles are going to be the same. But are there any particular challenges or threats that your kids have faced, or that you've seen other kids face, related to security and privacy?
Yeah. So for the main thing with kids is they don't have the life experience. They don't have the frame of reference for how dangerous these things could be. And, and there's always the classic, thing like, before you're turned into adult, you feel invincible and nothing can happen to you. And there's some of that, but I think a lot of it's just maturity. I mean, and I don't mean like emotional maturity. I just mean life maturity. I mean, just not an understanding. And of course, our kids today grow up with this stuff. I mean, any kid born in the last 15 years has grown up digital, grown up with the internet, and it's just a thing. It's just what you do. So I think that social media, which is something relatively new in a human lifespan or human evolution, has really opened up a lot of social pressure and cyberbullying opportunities. That I as a kid never had to worry about. So there's those kind of things that are kind of maybe unique to kids. And then, I think a lot of kids don't understand the value of privacy yet. So, they don't, and, you got to realize that, you can't always trust somebody on the internet if you have never really seen them in person. Are they really who they say they are? They may sound like it. Um, there's bad people out there. So yeah, I think I think you're right in that, of course there's cybersecurity and privacy issues, run the gamut as far as age. We all have certain things we have to be aware of, but for kids in particular, I think those are some of the areas where they might be different than other age groups.
Yeah, yeah. So then, having kind of those threats in mind, are there particular things that you think parents should be doing to help protect their kids, or even things that the kids should be doing to protect themselves, other than some of the basics that we've already covered?
Yeah, definitely. So a couple things from a parent's perspective. I mean, actually, first, before I even go there, I don't want. One of the things I've always said, and I said in the book, and I said anybody who asks, is the internet's not a bad thing. It's just a tool. I mean, it could be good or bad, right? So it's actually an amazing informational thing, and it has opened just that the technology, even the IoT stuff, is doing some cool stuff. And so I don't. It's kind of like the ocean or any other thing where you kind of respect it, but it's as long as you respect it and treat it right and don't do anything dumb, it's a great thing.
Yeah.
So I don't my two kids, they're getting older now. The one's 17, one's 19. But as they were growing up, for me it was just be careful, be smart. Some of the rules that I usually say is the internet's forever. I mean, I don't care what your app says. These pictures will automatically self-destruct and no one else can ever look at them. No, that is not true. If anything that goes onto the internet, anything digital, you assume will last forever and could be seen by anybody, which kind of leads to my grandma rule. I like to call my grandma rule.
Right.
And that is, don't do anything on the internet that you wouldn't happily show your grandparents, your grandmother in particular. I don't know what it is about grandmothers, and maybe it's just me, but for me, my my parents knew me, right? So, you hide some things from your parents, but your grandmom or whatever, they hold you in that high esteem where they don't see you every day, and and so they you kind of think of them as they're seeing the ideal you, and and so for me it was always like, if this passed the grandma test, then you're probably doing all right. Is for parents, stay involved, obviously, keep track of what they're doing without being pushy or without being overly protective. Some of the basic rules like I have with my kids is make sure if there's a computer where they're doing homework on or internet, and make sure it's in a public place. That they don't get to take that into their rooms when they're young. Same thing with smartphones. When they start getting those, my rule was you put it on the charger downstairs before you go up to bed. So in the morning it's guaranteed to be charged, but it's also, I mean, what a temptation that thing is. If I had that thing, I'd be sitting on it all night and doing video chats with my friends or whatever, And so I just took the temptation away. Things like, I wouldn't allow my kids to talk with anybody online that I had not personally met in person. Because there's a lot of predators out there and they pretend to be all sorts of things, and it's really, they're good at it, unfortunately. Yeah, parental controls. A lot of modern operating systems have built-in parental controls. Those are good too. There's things like Open DNS and things you could use to kind of prevent your kids from getting to the wrong sites on the web until they're old enough to understand what those things are. I guess those are the kind of things I throw out that are very kind of kid specific.
Yeah. So that's people helping their kids. Now let's kind of go to the other end of the age spectrum. So how about individuals helping elderly relatives, friends, parents, grandparents? Any advice on how to help the older loved ones in a person's life?
Yeah, and that's so different. I mean, because not just because of the age difference, just generationally, and because they didn't grow up with computers, and they didn't have the internet when they were kids, and so they can live without it, right? And so honestly, a lot of I actually teach some seniors in a continuing education course, so I see this a lot. A lot of them are just afraid to use the internet. They don't do anything on it. They won't do banking on it. They won't do anything even remotely that they consider dangerous. And ironically, there's actually, because of cybersecurity and modern encryption, there's a lot of things you can do on the line that, frankly, is safer than what we used to do. I mean, think about it. When you go to the restaurant and you used to give them your credit card and they would disappear with it in the back room and come back out with your check. I mean, 10 people could have written down your credit card number. We never really thought about that because we're just kind of used to it. But, if you do transactions online today, they're extremely secure. But I think in some ways it's easier because the generation didn't grow up with the internet. They don't depend on it like we do. I mean, man, if you took my smartphone away from me, I'd be jonesing. I'd be going through DTs, So, but for them, they can get by a lot of times with just a smartphone or a tablet, like an iPad or something. And those because they're kind of newer and because they're more locked down, they tend to be kind of more secure by design. They're not always private by design, particularly maybe Android products, but they're a lot more secure by design. There's a lot fewer ways for you to shoot yourself in the foot. So,
Mhm.
for a lot of them, I say, if you just want to like check email and play some words with friends, or maybe do some Facebooking and buy some stuff on the web, you can get by with a tablet. And a lot of those tablets are a lot harder to infect, and with viruses and whatnot. And so in that case, it can be similar. Let's see, for what else? I guess one thing I could say, and really this is true of any adult, but as you get older, you might want to think about your digital afterlife. You
Mhm.
might want to think about uh, like a password manager. Another advantage to having a password manager is you could leave your master password in your safe deposit box, or with your, in your will with your lawyer, so that when that time does come, it comes for all of us. The people that need to clean up all your stuff and deal with all your estate after the fact can get all your accounts.
Mhm.
And similarly with photos and documents and things, either if they're physical, you can get those scanned and make sure those get passed on. So maybe that might be something that might be a little more important as you get older. But really, any adult should be thinking about those things too.
That whole kind of digital legacy, digital afterlife, whatever you want
Mhm.
to call it, that is definitely something that is overlooked. I remember, when I was first putting my will together and talking to my lawyer about it, he said almost none of his clients, did they even have anything in their wills about
Mhm.
any digital accounts, assets, anything. People just never even brought it up. And just in my own conversations with people too, that's just something that they don't think about. And obviously, it's too late, once person has passed away. So, I've been kind of doing some more sharing of posts about that, and to do some more actually creating content to just kind of
Yeah.
raise that awareness and give people advice, because that can just cause a lot of headache for people, who then are having to deal with it after the fact. So,
Yeah.
so you talked a couple of times so far about kind of the apathy that there is about cybersecurity, privacy. Um, do you think that will ever change? If so, what do you think could occur or will occur that would kind of get people to be more serious and take more action related to their security, their privacy?
Yeah. And this is something that's been frustrating. I mean, it has frustrated me a lot. Like, again, like for me, when the Snowden stuff came out, for me, it was a game changer. It made me want to do something. And I really expected a lot more reaction to that than there was. Um, so again, to me, security and privacy are different. So I think from a security standpoint, I think I tend to think it's not more apathy, because I think most people want to be secure. I think that's uncontroversial. Um, but I think with cybersecurity in particular, I think people feel maybe overwhelmed,
Mm-hmm.
or there's too much. I don't understand this technology. Um, I, I don't know what to do. There seems to be threats on all sides of me. So throw my hands up. I don't know what to, I can't do something. I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's more like resignation. It's like I can't do
Sure.
anything, so why bother? So I think the main thing there is that there really is a lot you can do. There's a lot of low hanging fruit. There's a lot of what I
Mm-hmm.
like to call, seatbelts, sunscreen, smoke detector kind of level things, brush your teeth, floss. There's a lot of things in our physical world that we've just learned to do that we need to kind of just do.
Mm-hmm.
That, I mean, think about it, the lock on your front door is like what, $15, $20, but it's protecting, everything you have.
Yeah.
And so it's not like you even have to spend a lot of money, or have something that's foolproof. You don't have to be Fort Knox. I like to tell people, the classic line of, you don't have to outrun the bear. You just have to outrun your friend,
Yeah.
right? So, just being a little more secure than the other guy often is enough. And so, I think I'll tell a lot of people in that case is, don't give up. There are a lot of things you can do. Now, when it comes to privacy, though, yeah, I think there definitely is some apathy out there, and there are people that think it's no big deal, or I'm happy to give up some of this privacy in order to get security, which again I think is a false choice. I think it's really more about liberty versus control, honestly. But without going too far down that road, I, this is where I get a little more philosophical. So one of the Snowden, obviously, love him or hate him. for what he did. He made us aware of a lot of things. So if you just kind of set aside how he did it, I think it's important. And there's a quote of his. Let me see if I can find it here. I'll just paraphrase it if I can't. I had it written down. Of course, I can't find it. But if it's like, oh no, it says, arguing that you don't care about the right to privacy because you have nothing to hide is no different than saying you don't care about free speech because you have nothing to say. Mm-hmm. And I think that really says it well. And so for me, privacy is a capital P word. It's not about me. It's not just about what I feel that I either have to hide. It's really about all of us. I mean, society, democracy, in my estimation, demands some level of privacy. It's a human right. And we act like, back to the panopticon thing, we act differently when we are being watched. If we feel we're being surveilled, we self-regulate. We try to be boring. We don't want to stick out. We don't want to draw attention. And that's not good. I mean, for a human or just even for society. I mean, I had somebody in my class mention the other day that, if we had the surveillance we had today back in the, back in the 1700s, we would never have been able to fight for our freedom from England. I mean, because they would wouldn't know too much about us. So, yeah, I think that privacy is bigger than each of us, and we need to think of it as such. And we need to understand that it's something that if we don't kind of all pay attention to it and all kind of band together and realize that it's something we all need, that it's easy to lose. And so apathy is a problem, and the notion of I have nothing to hide, so I'm not going to worry. And it's bigger than that, and it's more to it than that. And if I throw out one more thing, go to Glenn Greenwald, who is one of the journalists that Edward Snowden approached when he had his all this data, had a really good TED talk on privacy. And I recommend anybody who's still not sure or not convinced that they just go watch that. I think it's a really good, 15 minutes that kind of gets to the heart of why privacy really is important.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So you're helping individuals take more responsibility for their security and their privacy. How about companies? Do you think companies should be working harder to defend people? If so, what should they be doing?
For sure. And I think part of the problem is that, we have no consequences really today. I mean, Equifax, I think one person went to jail for that, and that was because it was an executive who dumped some stock before it was more of a stock problem than it was the fact that they, let all that information go. And even software bugs. I mean, again, I'm an engineer. I know software has bugs, but so it's usually not so much that there are bugs, it's how you respond when those bugs are found. And of course there is just pure negligence. I mean, there are some folks that just don't bother, and I think they should be held accountable. So in one sense, I think that we need to start holding some of these companies more accountable when these things happen. And I think, that will hit their bottom line, that will get their shareholders, ticked off, and, maybe cause some action that way. But the other thing I think we need to have them, stop blaming the victim. There are, they always say, well, you should have had a better password, or you shouldn't have clicked on that link, or whatever. The real way to fix a lot of that stuff is to prevent those things from happening in the first place. And I think there's a lot of things, and we're getting there. The email services are trying to catch spam. They're trying to flag, suspicious attachments. Your operating systems are starting to get better. We're getting there. But I think there's a lot more that the tech companies could be doing to, A, prevent people from shooting themselves in the foot, and B, like ransomware. We've got to come up with a technical way to stop ransomware. Just have a running service on the back of your computer that's looking for something that's starting to encrypt a whole bunch of files and stopping it before it goes too far, right? I mean, I think there are a lot of things that tech companies could be doing, and if they had more, if there's more financial incentive for them, AKA regulations and penalties, I think we might see some more of that stuff. But the other thing too is, and this is also not going to come without regulation. And I know a lot of people, as soon as you say regulation, that just turns people off. There's half the people out there, as soon as you say regulation, they just turn off. But we have regulations for a reason. I mean, when I go on a plane, I got this from Bruce Schneier, who's a cybersecurity guru, and he was saying, when you go on a plane, you don't walk up to the pilot and say, "Show me your service records," and let me do an inspection of this plane. No, there's somebody else that did that for you. The FAA did that for you. When you go to buy beef at the store or food at the store, you don't bring along your test kit to see if it's got salmonella or, or any of those kind of things, because you know that somebody else did that for you. That's a regulation. That is that is something somewhere that someone decided was a good thing to have done for you by experts, so that you don't have to worry about it. And this is just another one of those things. So, in that sense, I think we need some regulation. And part of those regulations, honestly, if all they did was mandate more transparency, if they just came out and said, you've got to tell people what data you're collecting, what you're doing with it, and where you're selling, who you're selling it to. And if everybody knew what was going on, I think there would be a lot more demand for change.
Mm-hmm. So you've witnessed digital security and privacy trends over the last couple of decades. Does that make you optimistic or pessimistic about the future of personal cybersecurity and online privacy?
Yeah. Um, honestly, both. I think it's one of those things where it's this cat and mouse kind of a thing, where the bad guys keep getting better, but the good guys getting better too. So, it's going to be this constant struggle between the light and the dark, and but I think, overall, I think we're definitely making progress. I think it's going to get worse before it gets better, but I am optimistic that it will get better. I think it will have to. We're just going to have to at some point deal with these things at a fundamental architectural level, and I think those days are coming. And unfortunately, there probably will need to be some bigger incidents again to light that fire, but it's coming. So again, I think it probably will get worse before it gets better. I have to be optimistic. I personally, as a software engineer, think that these problems can be solved, and so I think we'll get there.
So if you keep your crystal ball out and now kind of zoom in on artificial intelligence and how you think that will affect security and privacy, do you think it's going to be a net positive, a net negative? How do you see that playing out?
Well, I hate to waffle, but I think it's going to be a little bit of both. So for instance, I saw some technology that generated literally random news stories based on a simple, like a one sentence prompt. And these AI and machine learning systems, had ingested a whole bunch of news articles. All you had to do is give it a prompt. And it was obviously something didn't happen. Like, let's say there was a bomb in LA today, an explosion at LAX. And this software just took that and ran and wrote like a 600 word or 800 word article based on this, including quoting people. It would invent quotes from, maybe someone from the FAA or from the Department of Homeland Security. They would, because they've read, these systems have been fed all these articles so they know who the head of the DHS is, and so they pick out these quotes and it was completely believable. So in that sense, fake news, I hate to even use the word, but fake news is a real thing, and it's becoming easier to do. So, and deep fakes, if you're familiar with that, we're taking videos and superimposing other people's faces on other people's bodies to the point where you can't tell. If you haven't seen these yet, just do some Googling, or actually, I don't want to recommend Google. Go to DuckDuckGo and search for some videos on deep fakes, and be careful of the porn ones. But if you look for what was one of the good ones? It was Jennifer Lawrence accepting like a backstage thing, talking about accepting an award, and they seamlessly put Steve Buscemi's face on her head, and it's just creepy. So it's.
I think there's a Zuckerberg one. There's an Obama one. There are several of them out there. Yeah, photos, videos, voices. Yeah,
it's like photoshopping, but now it's video, and it's audio too. And there's another technology I was looking at last year where they took a bunch of samples from President Obama and President Trump, and because Lord knows they've been recorded saying a lot of different things, and they were able to basically, you type in what you want them to say, and these things were able to spit out something. You could understand it. You could tell that it was not quite right, but it was kind of eerily close. So God, you get this thing over the radio that President Trump says we're under attack, or some of these things or a deep fake video that looks like, they're incoming missiles to New York City. And, you can cause a lot of havoc. And so, so in that sense, I think that, the AI and the ML machine learning stuff is dangerous, but on the flip side, you could also take those exact same tools and use them to try to expose deep fakes and to expose these other kind of fakes and the fake articles or whatever. And so, if we get to the point where these systems are automated enough to do a better job at catching viruses, or do a better job at stopping the ransomware that's creeping into your system, or stopping spam and scam emails. I think, again, these are just tools that can be used for good or evil, and I think we'll see both.
Yeah. 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 I mean, it's kind of the same with any kind of technology. Yeah. You see often it's the bad guys who are kind of pushing the cutting edge. But the good guys are not often far behind, and sometimes they are the pioneers. But yeah, it's just kind of like you said, that cat and mouse game. And the technology, it can be used by either side. And so yeah, it's just a matter of, where the resources are and kind of who's pushing the envelope.
Yep.
So your book is a great resource. You also provide a lot of info through your website, through your podcast. What other ways do you recommend that people stay informed of cybersecurity issues, privacy issues? Any particular sources that you recommend other than your own?
Yeah. And that's a really good question. Because part of the reason I did what I did is I didn't really feel like there were good resources for the kind of the average everyday person, which is 99% of the populace. So some of the ones I've found that I think are good for the average Joe, the regular everyday person, is like the Naked Security blog by Sophos. They have a really good blog. They put out some really good articles, and they're written in a way that pretty much anybody can digest, and they're very timely. They've always got some really good info and stuff going on right now that you might want to take some action on. So that's one I recommend. The Electronic Frontier Foundation does a lot of really good work, and they're putting out a lot of articles as well that are also very good. And they also get into, because they're kind of like maybe the ACLU of the technical aspect. They do a lot of fighting for rights. So you will see a lot of that kind of stuff as well. But they do have certain segments of their website that you can kind of tune into if you want to kind of stay clear of the political, maybe the more political or policy kind of stuff, and focus more on the technology stuff. They've got some great resources as well.
Yeah, they have like their self-defense section and some of those.
Yep. Surveillance, self-defense, and some other self-defense items. They've got some really good articles there. So I always found that to be a good resource. Let's see. There's a really cool site. If you really want to kick it up a notch and want to get super, I don't want to say paranoid, because these things do happen, but if you really want to lock yourself down, there's a place called privacytools.io. And this guy's been doing a lot of great work, and he's got some good articles. You can actually kind of read why these things are important. And then I think it's a he, I don't know, I guess, recommends a lot of really good tools that are both secure and privacy respecting that you could look at if you really want to kind of kick it up a notch. They've got some good stuff too. DuckDuckGo, they're a privacy-oriented search engine, so they're kind of like a replacement for Google that I highly recommend. They've also got a blog called Spread Privacy, and they've got some really good guides there too for your privacy. They're very well written. They've got a lot of good steps and pictures and links to other stuff. So that if I had to pick some off the top of my head, I think those would be some good resources.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I should have mentioned when I was mentioning your book and website and podcast. So you make them all easy to find because they all share the name Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. So if you look for that, that's the title of the book. That's the name of the website. That is the title of the podcast. So it's kind of all under that moniker.
Yep.
So this is off topic, but so your book uses the castle analogy. I mean, you have the dragons. You talk about drawbridges. You talk about walls. And you mentioned in the book that you're a fan of fantasy literature. So I was wondering, what are your favorite works?
I could probably talk a long time on this one. I've always really been a sword and sorcery kind of guy. I mean, I did read some sci-fi, I love me some Isaac Asimov when I was a kid. But yeah, when I was in middle school, a buddy of mine turned me on to Piers Anthony, and there was a Xanth series, Xanth. And even though they kind of look like kids' books, they're really actually not kids' books. But I started reading those at the time, and I think that may have what really kind of that and Dungeons and Dragons. When I was a kid, I played that in middle school too. Really kind of got me into. So maybe some of my first ones were probably like Piers Anthony. But as I grew up, I really liked the Terry Brooks stuff. He's got a ton of books, the Shannara series. I really like those. David Eddings has some great books. Terry Goodkind. I tried, so Terry Goodkind did the Sword of Truth series, and Robert Jordan did the Wheel of Time series. And these were epic saga novels that went on and on and on. And at some point, I caught up to where they had stopped writing, and then one of them died.
Mhm.
So I kind of got burned on that. And I kind of told myself I wasn't going to get into any more of these big, series until they're done.
Mm.
I blew it again though, because I went with Game of Thrones and I read the
Yeah.
books and they were great. And of course he stopped writing. I don't know what happened there.
Right.
HBO finished it off for him. Harry Potter, love Harry Potter. It's a very magical series. It's youth, young adult or whatever, but that's good. And then, maybe one other kind of different, Jim Butcher. He
Mm.
writes this series about this detective in Chicago who's actually a wizard.
Mm.
And so kind of like a wizard in modern day life. And I find those a lot of fun. They're not deep, but they're a lot of fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Nice.
How
Yeah.
about you? What do you like?
Yeah, so I am huge into Middle-earth. So
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah.
Tolkien, so Hobbit, Lord of the Rings, Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, kind of multiples of his, and regularly reread those, re-listen to them.
Yeah.
So those that'd be kind of the core, the mainstay. But others, so yeah, I've gone through not the entire Wheel of Time, but I've kind of made my way through several of those. The Mistborn series
Oh
by
yeah, I like
Brandon
those too. Yeah, those
Sanderson.
were good. That was different. Yeah.
Yep.
I
Yeah, Harry
didn't even go to
Potter.
Tolkien because it's just so cliche. But yeah, absolutely. That's just a given.
Yeah. Yeah, Harry Potter have gone through, like you said, kind of a younger audience, but still good. Chronicles of Narnia, same thing, kind of younger audience, but still stuff there that adults can enjoy. The High House by James Stoddard. Someone recommended that to me, and that was some interesting fantasy. But yeah, and then some of the others that you've mentioned as well. So yeah, it's always good to be exploring in that area.
Oh yeah, I love that stuff.
Yeah. All right. Do you have any other warnings, advice, encouragement, anything else you'd like to share before we conclude?
Yeah, and I always tell my classes too. It's like a 6-week class, and I as I've taught it over and over, I've learned that when when I'm done, people just they're shaking their heads and they're walking out like downtrodden. I'm like, no, that was not what I was trying to tell you. It's don't give up. I tell them it's kind of like sex ed. Like you're going through sex ed, and when you go to sex ed, they tell you all the bad stuff. They tell you how everything can go horribly wrong. But I mean, it doesn't stop you from having sex. That's good stuff, right? I mean, so it's one of those things where don't turn off the internet, don't throw out your computers. There's a lot of really simple things we can all be doing, which is like, again, kind of the whole point of the book. And so main thing, don't panic. Classic Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. Don't panic, don't give up. There's a lot you could do that'll make you safer. And the other thing that I kind of like to drive home is it's really important that we all do it, because it's kind of like a herd immunity thing. So the more of us do these things, even if not everybody's protected, if you can get enough people protected, then these things don't propagate. Just like viruses in the real world. If you get an immunity enough in the herd, there might be some weak ones in the herd, but there's not enough animals in the herd to spread it.
Mhm.
So I always like to tell people to help your friends, help your family, spread the word, and get them kind of get them all up to a baseline level, and it'll help all of us. The other thing I like to tell people, kind of as a general rule of thumb, is for for a market economy, a lot of people like to talk about the invisible hand of the market and market forces. And, if you believe in that, and if you're a capitalist and you believe in the market economy, well, then, the only way a market economy works is with an informed consumer. So learn about the products that you're buying, spend money on the things that have been shown to be good and avoid the ones that don't. Use your pocketbook to vote. And when you do see these products, and they are coming up, there's a lot of them coming out now that are very privacy respecting and security, and they're higher security, and they cost more money because it takes more money to do these things and to do it right. Spend money on them. I mean, actually, support these efforts, even if these particular products don't eventually catch on. You are kind of saying, hey, this is important enough for me to spend money on, and other people will take notice, and other people will start investing in those things too. So if we show that we're willing to put our money where our mouths are, it will help everybody. And similarly, for a democracy to work, it needs an informed electorate. So also stay abreast of policy stuff. Go to those town halls. Maybe just listen the first time, but put your representatives local, including local, and a lot of stuff being done at the city level. San Francisco or Oakland just recently banned facial recognition technology by law enforcement until they can kind of put a moratorium on it until they can kind of figure out what the implications are, which I think is a good plan. So even just the local level, there's a lot of things that you could be paying attention to, and get out there and, and kind of get involved and make your voices heard. So I think as a general, other advice that I would give people, again, kind of think beyond yourself. Think that this is about all of us. And so we all kind of have to participate.
Yeah. So, Carey, for people who want to learn more about you, where would you recommend that they go to find you online?
Well, as you said, everything's under one name at this point. It's my brand at this point. So Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons.com. If you go there, you can find everything about me at that point. My blog that I put out like twice a week, and that also is my newsletter pretty much. So you can either have it shipped to you or you can go read it. If you sign up for the newsletter, but you can kind of get the back issues if you look at the blogs, because they pretty much go hand in hand. So you can get a lot of information there, and I try to maintain some extra resources there, including other books, other websites that you might want to look at. So that's kind of I try to maintain it as a resource. So there's other stuff even beyond my stuff there that you might want to check out. And then, the other, I really I certainly don't do Facebook anymore. I got off of that a long time ago, but I still do Twitter. Unfortunately, I think there's problems with it, but it's kind of the only game in town when you want to do these kind of these last minute or kind of up to the minute urgent things. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, I'm at Firewall Dragons on Twitter. I tweet kind of more daily there and stuff that I think is important. So if you want to kind of be more up to date, maybe try me there. That's pretty much it. Of course, the podcast, you can get to that from the website as well.
Yeah, and I'll include links to all of this in the show notes that'll go along with this episode as well. So again, I'm joined by Carey Parker, author of Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, a step-by-step guide to computer security for non-techies. And I did previously review that book. You can find it in a previous episode, and then I've also posted that on the website. I'm Chad Warner of Defending Digital, teaching you to defend your digital life. Carey, thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today.
Hey, thanks a lot for having me on. That was, by the way, a great review. I very much appreciate that. Thanks a lot.
Sure, yeah, you're welcome. I hope you found that interview interesting and informational. You can find this post at defendingdigital.com, as well as my review of the book. You can also find other cybersecurity and privacy books on the resources page at defendingdigital.com, as well as links on where to follow Carey Parker and Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons. What should you do? Step 1, buy your own copy of Firewalls Don't Stop Dragons, a step-by-step guide to computer security for non-techies, and I have a link in the blog post that goes along with this episode. 2, as you read the book, take the time to follow its advice to increase your digital security and privacy, and help your kids do the same. You'll find some of the following points within the book. 3, regularly back up your files. 4, keep your computer and phone software updated. 5, use strong, unique passwords. The best way to do this is with a password manager. 6, turn on two-factor authentication when possible. 7, don't open attachments or links that you're not expecting. If you didn't ask for it, don't trust it. 8, teach your kids, and remember for yourself, that anything you put online could last forever and be seen by anyone. 9, stay involved in what your kids do online. 10, consider keeping your kids' devices in common rooms in the house and disallowing them to be taken into bedrooms. 11, plan for what will happen to your accounts, files, and other digital assets after you die. A password manager can make it easier to grant access. And 12, consider using parental controls. That's all for today. You can learn more about internet security and online privacy at defendingdigital.com. If you've been enjoying the podcast, I would love it if you would share it with someone else who's interested in internet security and privacy. And if you could leave a rating and review, I would appreciate that as well. Thanks.